Councilman from downtown. Councilman Pinewood. Councilman Davis. Davis. Okay. Call. Yes. Yeah, so demonstrate proposal has been paid for some time. And he also said you're always doing that. I am, David. How are you? You know, just say that.
I'm ready.
Good evening, everyone. It is now 6 o'clock, and I'd like to call the regular meeting of Suffolk County Council for Tuesday, January 26th to order. Let us stand, please, for the invocation, and please remain standing for the pledge of allegiance.
Let us pray. Our dear kind Heavenly Father, we do acknowledge you right now as the one in whom we live and move and have our being. We thank you for being the part of a country whose God is the Lord. And we stand and claim the promises for those who claim to be yours. For the country, you said that blessed is the country whose God is the Lord. And we stand on those blessings. As we start our meeting tonight, we ask your blessings upon every council member, all of our staff, and the visitors that we have here to witness our meeting tonight, the press as well. We ask that you help us to be obedient to your will and go through every agenda item according to your will. These and all blessings we thank and ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Fellow council members, I have been asked to remind you by Ms. Blanding that please speak into the microphone, especially when we are voting. She's having a hard time translating it into the minutes, so please speak directly into the microphone. Ms. Blanding, are there any changes or additions to the agenda?
No, sir, there are no changes.
Move for approval of minutes. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Baton and Mr. Baton and seconded by Mr. Baker that we approve the agenda. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? The agenda is approved. I have a motion to approve the minutes for my regular meeting for Tuesday, January 12th.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded by Mr. Edens. It's moved by Mr. Edens and seconded by Mr. Byrd. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay. Next item on the agenda, land use matters. This is second reading. Prior to second reading, we will hold a public hearing. Ms. Rubin?
Good evening, Helen Rubin for planning staff. The request before you this evening is RZ 2016 at 475 Middle Beach Highway. The applicant is Brown Investments of Sumter LLC. The applicant is here to speak on behalf of the request. They are the property owner. This request is to rezone approximately 7 acres of property from light industrial warehouse to heavy industrial. The property in question is the area that you see indicated in red. That box that you see just to the southeast on the corner is the existing business of the applicant. This facility space would be as an expansion to that business. Currently, this property is on light industrial warehouse. Ordinarily, this wouldn't be an issue except for the existing business that they wish to expand as a grandfathered non-conforming use in the light industrial zoning district. So in order to expand that business, they would have to rezone the property to a designation that permits the business. When we look at rezoning property, we look at the 2040 comprehensive plan as a guiding document to decide whether or not it makes sense in a long-term situation. In this particular instance, the property is influenced by the priority commercial mixed-use area, which is a priority investment designation in the comp plan. It's identified to direct future high-quality commercial and mixed-use development, usually of a commercial or residential nature, destination retail, etc., where we look at form, design, and function to really make it an attribute to the community. These areas are really designated to prohibit uses that seem to be more noxious, such as industrial or things heavily involved in outdoor storage. That being said, when we look at these requests, we look at long-term uses to determine context viability. We look at landscaping, we look at parking, we look at development standards, things that are not traditionally associated with an industrial user. Just to kind of give you some background to put it into perspective, we have a series of aerial photographs here. The first one's from January of 2019. It was a wooded lot. By January of 2020, most of the trees have been cleared out. This is not unusual to see throughout the community, especially in property that has woods or pines on it, because it's not uncommon for people to do harvesting on the property, and they do not come to us for permits for that. Later in January in 2020, it became apparent that this was actually being done in preparation for expansion of the business. And as you can see, the aerial photograph all the way to the left, or right, I'm sorry, was actually just taken on the 10th of this year, and that's what the property looks like today. As I said, the applicant does own American Auto Sales. They are currently licensed as a new and used automotive dealer, as well as a used motor vehicle parts dealer with SIC code 5015. They did extensive site work to the property, which was clear cutting the lot, commenced prior to any applications being sought or approved. Currently today, there are no development permits for the property. So there's no stormwater approval, no land disturbance approval, none of those things. It hasn't gone through that regulatory process. They have indicated their intent to expand their business is noted by the fact that you can see in the aerial photograph that they have. And this rezoning request is actually the result of an enforcement action. They're taking this opportunity to try and rectify the zoning issues, bring themselves into compliance. So this is a step in that enforcement process. Kind of give you some timeline to figure out how we got to where we are today. In June of 2017, American Auto Sales actually added used vehicle parts dealing to their license. At the time, it was a permitted use in the light industrial warehouse district. By October of 2018, County Council had removed that use from all districts except for the heavy industrial zoning district, which meant that all existing businesses in the county that are licensed under SIC code 5015 that are not on heavy industrial property became grandfathered non-conforming uses, which severely limits their ability to expand. In November of 2019, this property was acquired by the applicant, and by August of 2020, they came in to apply for a business license to expand their business onto the adjacent tract. And at that time, we did realize that the property was being used for something that we could not license there. And then enforcement actions followed, which is how we got to where we are today. So some site photos. This is what the property looked like on the left side prior to any land clearing. What you see on the right is from December of this year. That's what you see without looking back behind the buildings. We did get some additional pictures yesterday. It very much looks like it did in December. And also, this is what you see back when you kind of look back into the corner to the other property. So there are quite a few number of vehicles being stored on the property. They've been put there over time. My understanding and my belief is that they have not placed any new ones since we noticed them to not. With all that being said, the Planning Commission did recommend denial of this request. They do believe that rezoning the property to heavy industrial is not consistent with the 2040 comprehensive plan. I'd be happy to answer questions that you have.
On the picture, if you can back up a few, you had 3 different pictures of the aerial
Yes.
thing. What do you know about the pond in the back?
I know nothing about it because we have no plans and we have
Not
no
a
permits.
permitted retention or detention pond.
No, sir.
Now, what was your primary use for denying this?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
You said planning commission denied this, right?
Their recommendation for denial is based on the fact that it's not compatible with the comprehensive plan.
Okay, that was your reason. It's not
Yes, sir.
comprehensive. Okay.
So what is this business considered? A used parts, or is it considered a junkyard, which would probably need to be in heavy industrial, right?
So calling it a used auto parts a dealer is really a difference without a distinction between a junkyard.
Yeah,
It has the similar land use impacts to an actual salvage yard, simply by its very nature, which is, of course, this conversation is what led County Council to removing the use in 2018 from all districts except heavy industrial.
Right, yeah. So what is the business title? I mean, what are they gonna be doing there? Is it a salvage yard?
My understanding, and the applicant is here to get clarification on that, is that they are acquiring vehicles to remove parts and pieces from to sell on the secondary market. But in the meantime, it does require that there be stockpiles of vehicles available to take those parts from.
What do they do with the vehicle?
I'd have to defer to the applicant on that.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Any other questions on this one? Thank you. As I stated, there is a public hearing before we make our final second reading. I now declare the public hearing open. All those wishing to speak against the rezoning request, please come to the podium. Seeing none, all those wishing to speak for the rezoning request, please state your name for the record, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Weisenstein. I'm an attorney here in town for about 33 years, and I have been asked by Mr. and Ms. Brown, who own and operate Brown Investments of Sumter LLC, to come and make a presentation. Brown Investments purchased the property at 475 Myrtle Beach Highway back in 2017 and began operating American Auto Sales at that location, where they would sell used cars, but they would also repair cars for the public. And there were some vehicles stored on that 1.5 acre parcel that they would use to take parts from in order to basically use used parts for the vehicle repairs. People wanted to buy new parts or wanted new parts in their vehicle instead of used parts, and they'd go to the local, car parts dealers to buy those. But a lot of people prefer to get used parts because, quite frankly, they're cheaper than the new parts. So they would do that. So they had vehicles stored there for that purpose. When they purchased the property in 2017, and they purchased it on a long-term contract, they contacted the neighbors on the side and behind them and said, if you ever want to sell any of this property, please let us know because we'd like to buy it. So in 2019, they had the opportunity to buy a 5 acre parcel beside them and a 2 acre parcel behind them, and that's what they did. And then began cutting the trees and things of that nature. They gave the gentleman they hired to cut the trees instructions to leave a nice buffer on the front side. When he came to cut, Mr. Brown was in the hospital, and so he was unable to supervise the cutting, and more trees were cut off in front of the property than was anticipated or was basically agreed to. So what Mr. Brown has begun doing is adding a fence along the front edge of the property to try to screen from the road all the used cars that those photos showed. Well, with the weather, that just has not gotten very far. I mean, heck, it's raining today. But he's been trying to do that, but that's not all the plan. The plan would also be to add additional screening in the form of vegetation such as cedar trees or Formosa azaleas, red tips.
Leland Pines.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, that's it?
That's it, Leland Pines.
Okay.
She named the tree.
Are they on the time limit?
And I know,
Continue, we don't have a time limit for this. No, it's up to me. Okay. Okay.
thank you, sir. Thank you. Well, anyway, the long-term plan for the use of the property is to store additional vehicles for the purpose of being able to recycle some of the auto parts in making repairs, and eventually to try to sell auto parts to the public if people want to purchase the used parts. as the report of the planning commission stated, there are other companies similar on this street that have similar operations. And so the Browns are hoping that they'll be allowed to basically expand their business operation that is grandfathered in, to be able to store more parts for this purpose. Anyway, we request that council approve this zoning request. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lyons. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Mr. Brown would like to add some comments, please.
I'm Rusty Brown. I'm part owner of my family owns my wife and daughter mainly. When I bought this piece of land, it was right at 2 acres. Actually, the truth of the matter is, it had no license at all for the past 5 years. I went to Donna McCullough and told Donna. Donna said, well, it ain't. I said, I wanted to transfer the name license. They said, you can't, it ain't got no license. So that's when we started the license, and I asked her about, I said, there's a junkyard right down the street that sells truck parts. She got 20 acres or more. And that didn't have a fence up. But anyhow, asked her what I had to do. There was some cars in the front at the time. She said, you need to move them. I said, the ones down the street ain't moved, baby, but I'm going to move them because I don't like them. I don't want them in the front. I'm a hide all that. I don't want to see it myself. You know, I got neighbors across the street. They don't want to see it. I'm do an 8-foot fence. I finished 8-foot fence. And I put whatever tree it needs to be there. And when we started clearing the trees, I guess I must be just stupid because I didn't have no idea that I had to get a permit to cover up a stump hole. I had no idea. I got a reputable man that runs a business, got a grinder. They wanted $50,000 a grinder. He said, well, I'll just dig you a little small pond back there where you can put some fish in it and let your customers fish in it. So I thought that sounded pretty good to me. He worked storm damages and all this stuff, and I had no idea that you had to get a permit or whatever you call it, a thing that moved, whatever you call it, the word for it. You got to have like a dirt. If you're gonna move the dirt or whatever, you got to have some kind of paperwork to do it with. You got to get it approved. I understand all that now. I had no idea of it. Actually, I stayed in the hospital twice while this was going on. So I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to do it right. There's plenty of people in Anchor Maine that's got the same thing I got. I just want a license to do mine. You know, if I'm gonna straighten it out, I'm gonna get whatever you got to do for the land, where the water runs off and all that stuff. Well, I'm even gonna see that construction's gonna do that for me. I had no idea. I sell cars. I knew nothing about it. I mean, I didn't even think I had to get it zoned because I told him he did the closing on the property. I bought it 2 different times. When the man surveyed it, I said, just take the line out and let it all be one piece. But that wasn't what I was supposed to do. I mean, you know, it wasn't zoned the same thing. So I had no idea. And if stupid means, I'm it. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Anyone else want to speak? Hearing none, I declare the public hearing closed. What's the pleasure of council?
Mr. Chairman, I have a few comments to make before we make a decision on this. As you know, we invest a lot in coming up with a zoning comprehensive plan, and we asked the experts to give us some input in developing this plan, and when they do it, I think that we as a council should value their opinion and what they're doing. They're saying that this request or recommendation is not consistent with the 2040 comprehensive plan. Therefore, I'm not gonna recommend or vote for approval. Also, there's another issue too. There's residential houses on that street. And part of that street is zoned as residential. And right across the street from this facility or this place, on Mims Road, in the corner of Mims Road, right across the street, is property that's owned by my relatives, my family. They own that property. And for this to go right there is not gonna do nothing but devalue all of that property. There's 9 acres that's sitting there that's developed. It's home property where homes were built and people have died and left, but there's still a few homes there. People want to come back and develop that property. And I think that having this type of facility there only devalues that property. Also, we got caught up with a snare. Someone mentioned that there are other facilities like that on Myrtle Beach Highway. And I don't make no secret, I live right there on Myrtle Beach Highway. So I know that street. And the other facility that's up, we had to go back and help those people because they violated the law. And they started expanding back there and doing things that they didn't have no license to do. So we, instead of telling them to move it all, we decided to help them and let them keep what they had done, but we didn't allow them to expand anymore. That they had to come before us to expand. So I'm seeing the same thing. I'm seeing this is an eyesore. And I know the developers or owners said they want to put up a big fence and everything and so forth. But Myrtle Beach Highway is one of the main entrance into the city of Sumter, coming off Interstate 95. People travel right into Sumter and travel up and down that road. That road gets a lot of traffic. And a lot of people come into Sumter on Myrtle Beach Highway. So that's why I'm gonna vote to deny. I wish the gentleman all the success in the other endeavors, but in this case, I cannot agree to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Ask once again, what's the pleasure of council? What is the pleasure of council?
Well, my motion is that we deny the approval.
Mr. Bates made a motion to deny second reading. You have a second?
I do have another question. Was there anything said about any environmental effects, anything that adversely affecting that neighborhood environmentally?
The normal development review process was not followed, so I cannot answer the question about whether or not there's any environmental impacts that will adversely affect. I can tell you that the normal development process that would happen for the clearing of 7 acres of land did not occur, which would involve stormwater management, review of any sort of wetland possibility or potential on the property, and then looking at buffering, screening, and all of the appropriate things that would be involved in the scale and size of a commercial activity like this.
So Ms. Ruderman, you're saying that if it's approved, that he would be required to continue with the buffering?
If it's approved, he will actually have to go retroactively comply with all of our regulations, which would include hiring site designers and engineers to address the stormwater regulations that the county has in place, create appropriate buffering and screening plans, deal with any encroachment permits with SCDOT, implement all buffering and landscaping requirements for the property perimeter, Basically, we would treat it, even though all of those cars are there now, we would treat it like it's a virgin piece of property that has not been developed yet because the process has not been followed today.
Mr. Chairman, another question. Does DHEC regulate this type of business?
I am not certain how DHEC regulates automotive parts or salvage yards. I would imagine because they are handling vehicles that do have fluids in them, such as radiator fluid, gasoline, oil, etc., that there's probably some sort of environmental permitting that may be necessary, but off the top of my head, I don't know exactly who would be responsible for regulating that. But there is certainly potential for extensive contamination from those things on that property.
That's one of the concerns I did have, and wondering, are most of the residents out there on well water, or is there community water?
I believe that that section of Myrtle Beach Highway is served by public water.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I'd like to ask a question.
absolutely.
Has the developer met with the, has the developer met with the community about the project?
I'm unaware of any meetings that Mr. Brown or his representatives have had with the neighborhood. You'd have to ask him whether he's had any.
I see him nodding his head back there.
He says that he has.
Ms. Newman, if the second reading is denied at this point, and I tell you where I'm going with this, I rolled out there and looked at it. Because as Mr. Baton says, it's a main thoroughfare coming off of that expressway off of 95. And it's the ugliest tract of land that I have ever seen on the main track coming into town. And I just don't like it. So if we deny the second reading, could he come back again to the planning commission with a new plan?
So under the zoning and development standards ordinance, once a rezoning action has been denied, the applicant must wait a full calendar year to come back with the same request. He would have to come back with exactly the same rezoning request because heavy industrial is the only zoning district in the county that permits this use. And so if this request does not get second reading and subsequent third reading, he would have to wait a full calendar year to try and rezone the property again, unless council chose to entertain an ordinance text amendment.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could second reading be postponed?
Can be.
I would recommend postponing the second reading. I would recommend taking action on it, and if there's anything that needs to be discussed further, to do it before a third reading, you know. And I was just looking at all the details, and, you know, I have a heart for people when they have property and can't use it. I would like for him to be able to utilize his property in the way that he would like to. And if there's no imminent threat to the, you know, to the health of the surrounding community, then I'm okay with that part. And if he comes up to standard with the aesthetic part of it, then I'm okay with that as well.
Mr. Chairman.
And those are the only, you know, I know about the value of property and everything, and I, you know, and I empathize with that. And it's, you know, a somewhat difficult decision to make when you have something like this. And we would like for every entrance into Sumter to be aesthetically beautiful. And not only that property, but others, you know, we need to do better with that. But my position would be to allow him to do it with, you know, making sure that he put up those buffers and that there's no health, imminent health threat to the community. And I think the other parts will take care of itself.
Mr. Chairman, my suggestion would go just a bit further. I saw the gentleman nod when the question was asked if he met with the community. But I get the feeling that the councilman from Sumter was not a part of that process. I think what needs to happen is that the developer needs to go back and meet with that community, including the councilman from Sumter, to see if there are some things they can do to work out their differences. Many times this can happen when developers work with communities to mitigate some of the issues that they have. I remember doing some work for the Hotspot, which owns about 85 stores in Columbia. They had this one store on Farrell Road that was just infested with drugs and prostitution, and the community wanted it closed. As it turned out, the Hotspot met with the community. They put some things in place, and that store still stands today. So sometimes there is an opportunity for business and community to work together, and I'd like to see that conversation take place before we take action. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you know how many,
Mr. Chairman, and can I be recognized? Oh, go ahead, Jim.
do you know how many residents were mailed notices about tonight's meeting?
Every
Estimate?
property owner within 500 feet of the parcel boundary was what mailed the notification, so that probably took in a good chunk of the subdivision to the north. It certainly got all of the property to south and east and west of the property as well. You're probably going to have less property owners to the east and west than to the north and south.
So they were all notified.
We mailed the notices to the address of record for where the tax bills go, and the property was publicly posted and legally advertised.
Thank you.
Mr. Baker?
That was a question I was gonna ask, was people who lived in the community notified? Because I live within that 500 radius or whatever, and I wasn't notified. So, but again, I have an interest, and I'm a part owner in property right across the street from this. Heirs property that belongs to my wife, that now goes to my children. And there are plans for the people who live up north to come back and build their homes on that piece of property right across the street. Like I said, there's 9 acres. And there used to be 5 houses there. Now there's 1 house that sits there that they sold to another family. But I'm still wondering why we're going to approve something that's not within the 2040 comprehensive plan. I mean, we do this plan for a reason. And if we're not going to respect it, then we might as well stop doing it.
I make a motion to approve the second reading.
Have a motion by Mr. Barrett to approve second reading.
Mr. Chairman, could I have a comment? This is, I get real, first of all, I'm a tad bit uncomfortable zoning heavy industrial anywhere in this county, except in the industrial part, which, once we zone it heavy industrial, it's heavy industrial, but then on, and you could put whatever you want to put in it that fits in heavy industrial. So that's the first concern I have with this. My second concern is you got salvage yards, and then you've got used part yards, which they all are the same in my book. And I know you've got to have some type of regulations out there when you start tearing cars apart. Either it's salvage or a used part. So that's what's confusing me with, is it a salvage, is it used parts, is it both, is it, because I know where Gene's coming from. I would be, if I had a home here and somebody was getting ready to zone in my backyard, heavy industrial, and they were talking about putting salvage yard, I would be raising Cain about it. Nobody's here raising Cain about it, I don't know why, but,
SIC code 5015 for used auto parts sales is really a distinction without a difference from a land use impact standpoint, from a standard salvage yard. The property is used in a very similar manner.
so either one, you gotta go heavy industrial.
Which is why in 2018, after the rezoning down the street, council directed us to remove it from the LIW
I
district.
agree with that, because it was basically the same thing.
Correct.
So I would like to know, is DHEC or somebody involved with maintaining that property or testing that property or whatever? I thought that you had to have DHEC involved when you,
I can certainly.
is it just a salvage yard and not the parts?
I can certainly do the research and come back with an answer to you in 2 weeks, or to provide that information
Anytime
to
you're
you.
breaking cars down, your fluids are gonna be out there.
That is correct.
And the soil. And then that pond you got back there is another concern, because I don't know which way the water runs. Does it run towards the pond? Does it run out towards the highway? So these are questions I got that, and I understand what Gene's saying. If it was, I would not want to zone anything heavy industrial around my home. And that scares me right there. Once you zone it, it's zoned forever.
Mr. Chairman, I have one. Okay. And you might say, my biggest beef with this, and we go back to what we did in 18 and all, my biggest beef with this is the owner was already operating their non-conforming use already in when we made that change back in 18. He goes out and purchases more property, knowing to do the same thing. He knew what he was going to do. He wanted to expand this business without doing any homework. Find out about zoning, what's permitted, what's not permitted. And I'm sorry, I don't feel sorry for somebody that doesn't do their homework. If he'd done that, he'd never purchased a property. Much less be sitting here now. I will second Mr. Bateman. I don't think he ever got a second on his motion. I will second that motion to deny.
Well, I would be willing to defer it, but I want to know who overlooks a salvage yard. I really need to know that before I vote on this thing, because
If it's regulated by any state agency, it would be through the Department of Health and Environmental Control, and I can do that research and get that information for you.
well, does the applicant, does he know who does DHEC's gonna come out there and regulate that for you? I mean, tell you, check the water, check the.
Yeah, somebody is, Claude Neiman's doing it for me, I have no idea.
Yeah, I would like to know.
I'm sure it's DHEC.
For Mr. Baker, I text a friend of mine who owns another area in Sumter. He says only stormwater permit. Says DA does not, so just double checking that. It's one of our counterparts on another council.
So I'm gonna ask for a deferral until I get my answers. I know we've got a motion and a second already, but I'm not ready to vote on this until I know that answer.
Mr. Chairman, and this is just a point of order, what's the purpose of deferring when we can just do like we always do when there are questions? Let's go through.
Yeah, well, it is second reading, I see what you're saying.
Just go through second reading and, with the intention of gathering more information.
I forgot we were on second reading. And that's fine with me too. We can move to that.
Okay, well, Mr. Brown, I'm in a bit of a dilemma because Mr. Bacon made a motion to deny. Originally, he did not get a second.
Well, there was a second to deny.
No, there was not a second. And then Mr. Byrd made a motion to approve it, didn't get a second on that.
And now you got a motion to defer.
Well, Mr. Byrd
And then Mr. Eaton seconded
Yeah.
Your motion.
So, Mr. Byrd, can you
Which
please withdraw?
motion are we on?
Actually, we already.
All of them can.
Well, it's an interesting question because debate occurred before there was a second.
Right.
So, you as the chair are gonna have to rule. And then if the other members of the council don't like your ruling, then you look to set aside your ruling. But I'm not sure Mr. Baker ever made a motion to defer.
I thought I did,
I didn't hear that, did he?
but I will,
Okay.
I will back off of that and go ahead for a second reading. I'll make that motion a second reading, but I need some more information by third reading, that's all.
Okay, so it sounds like Mr. Baker's withdrawn his motion.
I'm gonna withdraw.
So it looks like Mr. Bacon's motion has been seconded, even though late after discussion. So I think that's your motion on the floor. That's my opinion. You have to make a decision.
Mr. Bacon made the motion first to deny second reading.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna withdraw my second. Move on with second reading, we get to third reading.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second the councilman's motion.
For denial or for
Deferment. For denial.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to deny second reading. All in favor of denying, favor of approving second reading?
I think you called for a motion to, a vote to approve the motion, which was to deny
Right.
second reading.
Right.
So now you're calling for a vote to deny the motion, which would deny the motion. So let's go ahead and finish that, please.
Right,
You didn't do the opposed.
that's what I was saying, all who are opposed, was only reading all who want to approve second reading. I guess that's.
No, you need to call for the opposite.
Now, it's the motion on the floor is
To deny.
to deny second reading.
And we got three
Yeah,
yeas.
three votes for the motion.
So, call for,
Who opposes?
who opposes the motion?
I'm just as confused as I can be. So what is the motion?
So it fails, 3 times.
He had a motion
Mm-hmm,
to deny, and he called for those in
Oh.
favor,
yes.
but now he's calling for those opposed to
Okay,
the.
yeah, I'm gonna oppose it to give opportunity for, more information.
So let me try this.
Now, motion to approve second reading.
I'll second that with the understanding that I need a lot more information as Vivian said. Very good. And I'm not convinced I'm comfortable with this right now. But I'll move it on to third reading with the hope that my information.
Mr. Chairman, I think my comments were driven by Councilman from downtown, Councilman Eaton's comment regarding the additional purchase of land and the additional requirements that were necessary, that was known up front. I think that's a very important piece to this puzzle. And so my support or my motion was in regard to that.
We got a motion and a second to approve second reading. All in favor of approving second reading, please raise your hand. All opposed to approving second reading. Motion passes 4-3.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a statement for the record, please. Again, we go through this motion, and we ask our planning commission to come up with a comprehensive plan. And it takes a lot of work to do that. And when it's completed, we come back and we vote on it. we vote on accepting the comprehensive plan. We say we're gonna accept it. But now we sit here as a body and say we're not gonna respect or uphold what's in this comprehensive plan. Now, to me, I think we are making a terrible mistake. We're setting a terrible precedent. Because anyone else who come in here and they do what this gentleman have did, violating the rules, expanding without doing his homework, without license, and then we just ignore it. And my thing is, this comprehensive plan is not worth the paper that it's written on, because it means nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Bacon.
Thank you.
Second reading is passed 4-3. Next item on the agenda.
And Mr. Chair, before we move on, just want to request if, I don't know if the county administrator would, Ms. Woodman could assist with this, but, we approved second reading so that we could have a third reading. And with, the prospect of getting some more information. And part of that is trying to make sure that the neighbors in that surrounding area are very well informed. And I don't know if county administrator Ms. Woodman can help with that. But that's my, I've seen when we've done this, and we've like done like a special committee or something to hear them, or a mediator or something to come bring them to the table, so that we can try to come to some kind of consensus without just telling the man, no, we can't do this.
Mr. McGinney, I just off the cuff, my concern, if we tried to do something like that, we'd be setting a precedent that we went deviated from our normal practice and procedures, which may put us in a very vulnerable position in the future. I think we have a standard that we follow, and I think we probably, that would be my first gut reaction, but certainly we'll be glad to research that.
Now, we've actually appointed ad hoc committees, when decisions like this have had to be made. And this was, I've been on here for a while.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And this has been a while back. And it's just to, try to get information and to just be fair and give everybody opportunity. The gentleman stood there and said that he just didn't know, and I honor that.
I understand that. And again, I know parliamentary procedure, but I would think if you came to that position,
Right.
then I would probably recommend the council take action to defer until that kind of result can happen. Instead of, I don't think 2 weeks' time, I don't think it's going to be enough to drive that answer. Have an ad hoc committee, meet with the people, and get to a resolution where you want to be. But
And the reason why I said not defer, but, wait for third reading, because we don't have to. The third reading.
No, I'm talking about the next one, the next meeting.
Yes.
As opposed to
We can
approving, that's right.
delay
Delay.
third reading for, for.
For more information if necessary. Yes, ma'am, I think that would probably, I'll look back at Jonathan and see if that would be a prudent recommendation as far as how to proceed through this procedure.
Right.
Like that.
And then I would like to have opportunity to go out there and look myself, and I would like to be able to contact some of the neighbors too. And of course, I honor what Councilman Baden is saying, but I think I just have a lot of tolerance.
Understand.
That being said, we have approved second reading. On to new business. First thing on the new business is the ratification of the County Council 21-22 Standing Committee.
Move for approval.
Second.
Been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none, the Standing Committee appointments for 2021-2022 are approved. Now we move on to first reading for ordinance number 21-942, Mr. Bryan.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, next item is 21-942, which is an ordinance to approve a fee and lieu tax agreement for that piece of property that Thompson Construction Group bought the state building. And so you heard Jay Schrader briefly on this previously, but just to recap quickly, the assessment ratio will be 6%. It will adjust every 5 years. It will go on for 30 years. There's a 5-year investment period, but if they invest $5.6 million in that first 5 years, then the investment period will extend 10 years. There'll be a 5% special source revenue credit for 10 years. Those are the major business points. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Move first reading.
Second.
And moved by Mr. Baker and seconded by Mr. Byrd, that we approve first reading on ordinance 21-942. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? First reading for 21-942 is approved. First reading for 21-943, Mr. Bryan.
21-943 is in order to put that property where the spec building is into multi-county park, into the Sumter League multi-county park.
Move for approval.
Second.
And we've been properly seconded. That we have first reading on ordinance 21-943. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? All opposed? First reading for ordinance 21-943 is approved. Okay, ordinance number 21-944, first reading, which is an ordinance to create the Sumter City County Bill Advisory Board. Wow.
Mr. Chairman, this is the ordinance you have before you. It's from the City County Litter Advisory Board. There'll be 3 members appointed by the majority county council, 3 from the city council, 1 member appointed by the development board, 1 by the Sumter Chamber of Commerce, 1 representative from the SCDOT, 1 from the sheriff's office, and 1 from the Sumter Police Department. The purpose would be to give advice to the elected officials and law enforcement officials on how to proceed with regard to litter in the city and county of Sumter. We're going to take any questions.
And for first reading,
Second.
a motion by Mr. Byrd and seconded by Mr. Baker. Any questions? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? All opposed? 21-944 is approved. Come down to any reports from council members on meetings or trainings or conferences. Hearing none, monthly reports, Ms. Brandy.
Yes, sir. The first one is the Public Safety Awards that's going to be held on January 28th at 1 o'clock at the American Legion building on Artillery Drive. And if any council members are interested in participating, please let me know, just to let them know that you'll be coming. Also, we have here the Sheriff's Monthly Report in the packet. In addition to the Sheriff's Monthly Report, we also have the Sheriff's Annual Report for 2020. And we also have Planning Department, Building Department activity, and the minutes for the Sumter County Planning Commission on December. And then, of course, the next meeting, which is tomorrow, January 27th at 3 o'clock p.m. I mentioned before about the South Carolina Economic Development School, and this year they're going to be going from one location to the next. I think about 4 locations. One in, maybe in here. I think I put it in the minutes. Here it is. February 4th through the 5th is the leadership in Hartsville. May is North Augusta, and August is Beaufort, South Carolina, and then November, which will be the last one, and graduation will be Orangeburg, South Carolina. The Development Board will be glad to pay the cost for this for any of the council members. And I think that's it.
Mr. Nixon?
Mr. Chair, council members, good evening. A couple of quick items. First, as far as the COVID report, that information is in your packet. If you have any questions, please get with me after the meeting. Do recognize that we do not have the veterans information this time on the packet, and that's because it was unavailable through the coroner's office. As you know, as reported to council, we did lose our first member of our county family and one of our part-time officers in the coroner's office, Mr. Ken Bell, unfortunately to COVID, and I believe it's caused them some stress and some time issues over there. So they weren't able to provide that, but they assured me they would get it to me in the future, and we'll just catch up our numbers then. But the other information's in your packet. If you have any questions, give me a call. The second item I'd like to report out on is last week I had an opportunity to participate virtually in our South Carolina City County Managers Association meeting. And while there were a number of good topics, as there usually is at these conferences, one of the hot topics, I would say, was the vaccine rollout, and they had a representative, the head of DHEC, as part of that meeting, and she was discussing some of the issues that they're running into as far as getting the vaccine out, and how there's going to be a new rollout of a new system. You've heard me discuss the VAN system, which is the federal system that you have to go through to get registered. They're trying to come out with a little bit different system in South Carolina that would be a little bit more user-friendly. And we're hopeful that the citizens of our state, particularly in Sumter County, would have easier access. So look for that probably over the next couple of weeks, she said. So hopefully that'll help. The other thing we're working closely with DHEC is providing local locations where they can have, I wouldn't say mass vaccinations, but those that meet the categories that have been opened up. They would have a location in Sumter they could possibly do up to 500 a day. I believe they're scheduling one next week, and then of course they'll schedule another one to mirror that one in about a month so that they can get that second shot. It's important when they schedule the first location, they also schedule the location for the second vaccine, which is critical. So they're working through that currently in Sumter. We've not gotten much more information as far as opening up the numbers of the folks that qualify for the different categories. I think that according to her, there's still a limitation to the number of vaccines that South Carolina is getting, for that matter, I think, the entire country. But they're trying to work through that. And of course, as new suppliers come online, then they'll have access to additional vaccines. But of course, right now, there's just Pfizer and Moderna. So those are the two primary vaccines at this point. But,
Gary, I got a quick question on that.
Yes.
When you're saying locations, are we talking about the Civic Center, or are we talking about maybe moving out in the county to some areas where people who might not be able to get to the Civic Center?
I think they're looking at both approaches based on their information. So they're
Okay.
looking at some of the rural areas, particularly some rural providers who would have easier access, but they're also looking for the larger location. And with the larger location, I think that's where they're talking about the 500 per day.
But I would hope that, because there are people that have a hard time getting into town.
Right. And right, we've offered up the Civic Center, but they've not taken it up. They've not confirmed any dates there. But they're also looking at another location in Sumter that would, but they're trying to do it right now. And there's procedures are to do it indoors. So they've tried some pilot projects around the state where they've done it outdoor with the drive up, but they would prefer to do it indoors. So they're trying to set up these pods where people would have, without having to wait in a line, they would schedule. You have to be scheduled. And not, right now, they're not opening up to anybody for walking up. It's still scheduled times, and that's critical. And the real importance of that is if it's a scheduled time, then of course they can schedule your second time. And that it also helps speed through the process. But that's where they're at now. That they haven't identified any locations other than to say they are coming. And next week, they'll probably identify the first location, and then again, they'll schedule the second one at the same time. We're opening up our facilities. We talked about our community centers would be a great location, particularly in the rural areas. They just have to have a provider or somebody that can get the vaccine at that location and provide the shot. But we're opening up all our facilities to them, recognizing the priority of this vaccine effort.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Mr. Nixon, I joined the councilman from Dalzell in his desire to have rural locations. We have a number of seniors who don't travel, who are afraid to travel outside of their normal scope, which would be from home to church. They do feel comfortable in church. They may feel comfortable in a community center. But I join him in that regard, and there are places in both our districts that will be willing to host those events.
Yes, sir, and we're communicating that to our regional rep with DHEC, and I believe we'll probably, certainly by our next meeting, we'll know of some locations, but we have emphasized the importance of trying to reach these rural areas, particularly in Sumter.
Mr. Chairman, and please don't forget about San
Absolutely. But we're opening up all our community centers, anyone they would make, and I imagine it again, it'll be a rotational basis. They'll still have that big area that they'll probably focus on, but they'll have these smaller pockets they recognize they've got to serve.
So how would they get to the community? So it would be something in the paper or something saying that if you're over 65 and you would like a shot, they're going to be at
They have
possibly such and such place, and you need to call it.
They have don't hold me to this name, but some kind of vaccinator or something like that. It's on a state map, and once they identify a location, when people register, they still have to register. They're not just going to open it and say, "Come on in." When they register, it's gonna light up as a green spot, and they can go to that and apply there. And they're also coming up with another phone line because a lot of people are not comfortable working with computers and accessing that network. So they're trying to come up with another phone system line that they can use. As you know, when they first rolled out, that's what crashed because it had so many folks trying to register that way. But they're coming up with another system again that'll be user friendly and that people will be able to identify, and based on your address, you'll be able to go in there and click, and that's where, if that site, they'll tell you what date that site's going to be open. And it'll go until it fills up. They maybe only have 200 vaccines, but the first 200 that register at that location would get it for that period, and then of course they'll open up additional. That's how I see it rolling out around the state. Okay, still on that?
You have a question or comment?
Okay, just a couple more things, if I can move on to the next. First, or the last thing I should say, in the back corner of the room, we have our new IT director, Les Van Dielander. Les, want to maybe hold up the hand. The only reason I'm identifying tonight, he's here, and I wanted you to see him. His first day was yesterday, so he's still trying to learn his way around the county. And David, thank you for helping him around and showing him all our IT needs in our county. But we'll have an official greeting and welcome, and he can tell you a little bit more about him in the next couple of meetings. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Chairman, when convenient, I'd like to have a moment for personal privilege.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to piggyback on the county administrator's report on the COVID-19 data. And I'm doing this because I would like to make this a matter of record. On January 18th, 2021, Sumter City Council extended its mask mandate ordinance for another 60 days. It is now set to expire March the 21st. Once again, I ask that Sumter County Council pass a mask mandates ordinance in the county similar to the city of Sumter's ordinance. And I state a life in the county of Sumter is equal to a life in the city of Sumter. Today, 26th of January, an article on the front page of the item titled, "Locally, Sumter Also Strained in Surge of Virus." It was stated that in Sumter County, there was a record of nearly 960 new cases in the last 2 weeks. Mr. Lewis Smith, interim CEO of Prism Health Toomey, said on Friday, January 22nd, that Sumter is seeing a surge in hospitalization because of COVID-19 complications. Smith also said that the volume of the increase is a continued burden on the hospital staff. During the period December the 8th through January 26th, Sumter Daily Item obituary reported that 37 military veterans have passed away. 30 of those military veterans are over the age of 70, which again many of the veterans have underlying conditions, age as well as other symptoms that they contracted while in combat or serving in a foreign country. COVID-19 cases as of today, on the 25th, 7,146 and something. And as the record shows, there's 122 deaths. And that source is from South Carolina, PA. And again, I'm gonna ask that this body pass a mask mandate ordinance because the virus is still here. There's new strains of the virus that are coming throughout the country. Haven't reached South Carolina yet, but it's all around South Carolina. So I'm asking that this body pass a mask mandate that is similar to the mask mandate of the city of Sumter. Thank you.
Mr. Washington?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just start by saying I've completed the first two sessions of orientation for new council members, and one of the things that they talked about during the session was the need for council to have their roles identified and to have a strategic plan. There are a number of things that we need to be attentive to move Sumter forward. Sumter is currently the 6th largest developing city in the state, so we have a great deal of promise. Have observed in the first two meetings that we all sort of operate with our individual interests, and that's good until it's time for us to make some decisions. I think it would be helpful if council could have a workshop where we could freely discuss the needs of the county. There are a lot of basic needs that citizens are not getting. And we've talked about a couple of them in just the 2 weeks that I've been sitting on council. We've talked about litter, we've talked about the veterans, but there are other issues. And I think if we could have a conversation during a workshop, we can begin to form and deal with some of those issues before the budget is upon us. And we have to start slicing and dicing. If we can talk now, we can figure out how we package some of those things, how we address some of those things. And I would like to see us do that. And at the appropriate time, I'd like to put that in a form of a motion. Does it need to be tonight? You can think about it a little bit. But I think that's crucial in moving Sumter forward. I've had conversations with a number of council members individually, and they have expressed to me interest in some of the things that I'm interested in. The councilman from Dazzle to my left, he and I have an issue with trash around Shore Air Force Base and in both our districts. Shore Air Force Base is very important to Sumter County. We have other issues that we need to address. So I am requesting that the chair consider the conversation, and at the appropriate time, maybe next meeting, I'd like to put it in a form of a motion, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you privately in this regard. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. Now we move to adjourn.
So,
A comment from the floor.
motion.
Okay. Second? Okay. That was properly moved and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor?